panel now will discuss with you the next steps to be taken in the next 12 months. So what has the research team in mind? What is on their to-do list for the next 12 years? And what are your suggestions? And what are your suggestions and questions? Before we start with the discussion, I would like to introduce two more colleagues from the research team, which is Professor Roman Hubert on the right side over there. He is waving. He is a professor of internal medicine and gastroenterology at the University of Freiburg, Germany, and he has a broad clinical experience in internal medicine, gastroenterology, and complementary medicine. So he knows both worlds very well. He heads the Center for CAM at University Medical Center Freiburg, which is one of the largest university hospitals in Germany. And there he offers counseling and treatment. And CAM is responsible for teaching medical students and supervises a team of researchers. And his research has been awarded several times. So he has a wealth of experience in integrating Western medicine and complementary medicine. Another team member is Dr. Klaus von Ammon. Here is Klaus. He is a senior researcher at the Institute of Complementary Medicine, (ICOM), at the University of Bern in Switzerland. He started his career as a neurosurgeon, in Munich and Zurich, and then he decided to study homeopathy. Quite a change. And he has worked as a general practitioner using homeopathy in his practice, and he eventually became a senior officer and consultant in the homeopathy department of the Institute of Complementary Medicine, (ICOM), in Switzerland. He authored many scientific publications in epidemiology and clinical and fundamental research. Merlin, what type of feedback did you get about the patient information leaflets from GPs and patients? What is your idea about elaborating them and in the future?
In the presentation, I already showed some of the feedback. So the patients that we discussed and discussed it with in the patient participation group were broadly positive. But as some of you may be aware, the patients that you get in a patient participation group are not necessarily representative of the whole population. I think it would be useful to test them out in a larger, more representative sample of the population. It would be interesting to do a survey, maybe a simple online survey of patients in different European countries to see what treatments people are actually using for cough. Do they first look for an antibiotic or for a particular type of complementary therapy, or and also look for correlations between what treatments they use and what the outcomes are in terms of how long it takes them to get better. Of course, it's not high-level evidence, but it would give us some basic information on what treatments people are actually seeking at the moment, and might help us to prioritize which of the tens or hundreds of complementary therapies that came up in the systematic reviews, which of those we really should prioritize to do high quality clinical trials. And perhaps I should add the other thing, feedback from both patients and GPs was more information needed on interactions. So maybe we need to think about better pharmacovigilance systems, because actually for these two remedies, Pelargonium and Andrographis, I'm not aware of any information on interactions, but there's always that question at the back of your mind: how good is the pharmacovigilance system? If there were interactions, would we know about them? So I think having a good pharmacovigilance system in place, even for herbal medicines, would help to, together with data on how the volume of use of these products in all the European countries, would help to provide some reassurance on, hopefully lack of interactions, or if there are interactions, then it would help us to discover what those are.
And these information leaflets, how would you deal with the different levels of evidence?
Well, at the moment, we've only included those that have the highest level of evidence. from the overview of systematic reviews, because I think particularly if you're asking doctors to hand out these leaflets, they won't accept anything less. And even the highest level of evidence that we found so far, some doctors felt wasn't sufficient because it's only 1 or 2 trials, it's a small number of patients. They felt that more research was needed before being able to recommend anything. And they might have a point, because, you know, if you're recommending a herbal remedy which costs £8 or £9, and you don't know if it's better than honey and lemon, which costs maybe less than £1.
One option, certainly in the UK, is there's a thing called personal health budgets. So people with a chronic condition would be given a budget which they would be allowed to spend in the ways that were medically approved to maintain their present state of health or even improve their health.
This is a patient-centered medicine, actually, and this goes a bit away from the evidence-based. There's a patient-centered or patient-biased, because we know that the attitudes the patients have to their illnesses, to their diseases, that this very much influences the outcome and the compliance and adherence and all factors. And if we have patients that do what they really want, what they are convinced of, then outcome is better, at least in chronic diseases. I think antibiotic is not even the best topic for the chronic diseases, we know that. And then that we sort of give a certain freedom even to the patient how to use, to spend this, either in accordance to what his personal beliefs or not, then it would strengthen this patient-centeredness, this compliance, this adherence of the patient, which is an important factor.
David was talking about gathering information with apps and so on. If we do find an avenue where we can increase the use of complementary medicines, then we need to be gathering the evidence on an app. Make it easy for them to record.
Just to add to that, we're currently now working on also an app, having all this information we gathered, collected now, and making it accessible for doctors and patients on one side for each country. So you can use this app, that's the idea, in the different countries where you have different possibilities.
Roman, my question to you. You are head of a center of CAM, and you are, you know both worlds, conventional medicine and CAM. And what are, in your position, the challenges of integrating CAM from the perspective of a clinician with experience in both mainstream medicine and CAM?
I built this small center for complementary medicine 20 years ago, so this is a long period of time, and I think that now, after 20 years, I can say, yes, it's sort of established in a certain way, and there's trust also. But it's a long process at universities, and it's still a fragile situation. But it needs a lot of work in accordance to the principles of the university, and it needs a lot of trust actually also to build this up. I see a paradox with regard to CAM. This is the CAM paradox, perhaps. It's that on the one side, we know from all surveys that that a majority, at least in Germany, would like to be treated with natural substances. With they would sort of self-help has an important point. And we made an own survey at our university hospitals that more than 50% of patients from oncology, gastroenterology, and even cardiology, they have a request for complementary medicine. They would like to be informed better on this. But of course, this is not possible for a small department like us. And that's on the one side. And we even have some evidence now. We have clinical randomized controlled, placebo-controlled studies via CAM remedies, CAM principles are included in guidelines if you look for irritable bowel disease or ulcerative colitis, and even for cough. in the guidelines, in the German guidelines for cough, you find herbals as not as an A recommendation, but as a can-do recommendation. So you can give time, standardized time extracts for treating cough. And because there is a placebo-controlled studies on this, and this has been included by the guideline team. So that's what we have on the positive side, and on the other side, there's what I see is as almost zero recognition from the politicians in Europe and the different European countries. Maybe Tuscany is a sort of an exception, and but also in Germany, politicians are not talking, are not sort of having this topic in focus, and we have still almost no funding for complementary medicine, different to the US and to China, who really give substantial amounts of money to studying the efficacy of traditional medicine and herbals. So there's actually a gap between the need from the population side and the recognition from the politician side and from the universities. You have only scattered and isolated activities in the medical faculties in Germany, and I think in Europe it's not better, it's even worse than in Germany. So what's actually the reason? And many tend to say, yes, it's a lack of evidence. So this is actually, everybody is talking about a lack of evidence. That's the reason for everything. And I think this is not true. This is lack of evidence is also, of course, it's a reason, but it's secondary. It's not the primary reason. The primary reasons are system-made, and it's a system of lobbyism in politics, and it's a system how universities work. That's my perception as a professor on a university. I know a bit about how universities work, and if you look on how decision makers in policy, in research policy and in health policy, where they get their information from, it's not from the man on the street who says, oh, I would like to be treated with complementary medicine. No, it's from companies, and it's from lobby organizations, and it's from experts. That's where they get their information from. And these companies, of course, if you look now, the profit margin and the benefit what you can get with pharmaceuticals from herbals, this is much worse and less than from things that you can patent, and then if you have a patent, then of course you can have a completely different profit margin. And there's a little interest of pharmaceutical companies in herbal products, and I understand this. And the experts, they are trained in universities, and in the universities the CAM has been neglected for decades, so you can't expect from experts normally that they sort of make lobby work for CAM. Now this is sort of, I just finished this thought, and in the university system, just to point out a little bit how this work is far away from being democratic. It's has a very strong hierarchy, and we have as driving factors, we have impact factors, and we have third-party funding, and we have power. And if you gain this, and if you are a dean or a medical director of an institute or of a department, then you can do more or less what you want. There's no control anymore, but all others in your team, they have to sort of ask whether they can do this, whether they can do research with that, and they need permission. Yeah? This is a system actually, and this is a system problem, and please be aware of this. And it's not only the evidence, it's something that that has to be changed by politics. It's not from the universities, so they won't change from themselves, but policy has to give the guidelines actually to change this. And I see quite interesting, even good or interesting developments. For example, we have in the state of Baden-Württemberg in Germany, we have now we got some money from the Ministry of Health, and they finance a network of CAM research because of some people influence these politicians, and because they know that in the state of Baden-Württemberg, in the southwest of Germany, there's a strong desire of the population for CAM, and so we got at least some ministry money now for the first time for CAM networking. And also in 2004, this is now 14 years ago, the medical students had, since 2004, they had to learn about CAM, and CAM is now included in the curriculum for medical students as something compulsory, and this is why I see about 360 medical students every year, and I'm convinced that I know more about CAM than the generation before. So this is positive developments, but all in all, it's a political dimension, and it's not only science that brings CAM forward. Science is very important. I also do that. I like this, but the politics is actually crucial.
Seamus Connolly from the European Chefs Federation and the European Federation for Complementary and Alternative Medicine, EFCAM. EFCAM represents the professionals in CAM who are not medical doctors, about 300,000 of us across Europe. I'm taking the opportunity to say something now because of what we have just heard. The issue is not evidence, the issue is politics. And so what way then should we think? In very many other gatherings that I attend in Brussels and elsewhere in Europe over the last 15 years, I'm hearing one statistic every single solitary meeting, that we spend less than 3% on public health or the health budgets across Europe. There are some small variations in that, but that is the general figure, less than 3%. That figure has not changed in 15 years. But what has changed in 15 years is the amount of evidence that supports vastly increased spending on public health, vastly increased spending on prevention and promotion. But it's not happening. And it's not happening because there isn't a political coalition of the people who can convince the policymakers that this is the right way to spend the money. So evidence will not solve the backlog. What will solve, or will attempt to begin to solve the problem, is coalitions with the appropriate people. And that means that, for example, here today, the panel needs to have economists, social scientists, politicians, and various other people. Now, I know this event is for a very particular purpose, and the presentations are completely apt and appropriate, and it's a very, very valuable thing, what we've actually heard. But if we really want to make progress, we have to start building these coalitions. What we need to be doing is developing the relationships with the people who are working on the community on the ground, who know what people want, who know what people need, who know the ways in which people can be influenced actually to live a healthier way, and to bring in the various complementary and sustainable healthcare approaches that can actually support that.
And I agree with a lot of what you say. It's true that it's not just about evidence. And I can give two examples of that. So in the UK, for example, the NICE guidelines on depression do not include a recommendation to use St John's wort, even though there's a Cochrane review of 29 studies showing fairly convincingly that St John's wort is at least as effective as conventional antidepressants. And I've tried to find out why, and the official reason is that there are concerns about interactions with other medicines and that the preparations on the market are not standardised. But if St John's wort was made prescribable, both of those things could easily be overcome. In fact, every medicine interacts with something, and that's the job of a doctor to work out what is safe and what isn't safe to give to particular patients. And there's a group of researchers in Oxford who did a network meta-analysis comparing different antidepressants and showing which one was more effective and safe. And they didn't include St John's wort in the results they presented. So after hearing the presentation, I asked them, well, did you look at St John's wort? And the man said, I don't want to say this in public, but actually St John's wort came out best and we didn't believe it, so we excluded it. So that's what I call prejudice-based medicine rather than evidence-based medicine. But having said that, I think in order to win this battle, we do need to do some research, and we do need high quality evidence combined with high quality politics. So I think if you haven't got the high quality evidence, you haven't got a leg to stand on. But if you have got the evidence, then that can support you to make that political argument. So I think we need both. It's not either or.
Maybe one thing about high quality evidence. Of course, everybody wants to have high quality evidence. But are we going to wait for another 30 or 50 years before we have spent so many millions on a few of these remedies, whereas there are many promising treatments and which are safe, and maybe they can help to reduce antibiotic use in the next decades? So I don't know. I would take a chance on that and really monitor it very well. But I think at least this should have given a chance instead of only focusing on high quality evidence. Of course we should.
I think there was a bit of hope with regards to the NICE guidelines. Because the NICE guideline, the new NICE guideline on the minor infections in the UK, is going to include the advice on using of Werf-Kok.
The problems that we have some evidence and we discuss the evidence. This is one field. On the other hand, we have these wishes of the population, of the patients. They want to have this CAM methods. And if we are thinking about our problem here, antimicrobial strategies, we can't wait. You said we can't wait the next 20 years that we get this high quality evidence. And if we look for the outcome, it's the traditional medicine. And you have this WHO guideline to respect traditional medicine. We know that we have a lot of success with these traditional methods without the high quality evidence that it is working, but we have something like a swarm intelligence because people use it, and we know about your studies that anthroposophic practitioners, that was, if I remember, less than a third of the normal practitioners using antibiotics in the daily work. And these are data, and these are very high quality data we have to respect. This is social science, it's not medical science, it's not biological science, but we have to use this data if we want to solve a problem. And we have all this data that we can use CAM methods in different ways, and we can decrease the amount of antibiotics in not very severe infections in the whole European field. And this might be, in my opinion, this might be the next important step to have these prevention effects of the traditional medicine, and we have to recognize that we have all these positive effects by the general practitioners.
Just to come back on what Seamus was saying, I mean, I agree that if we want to move fast and we want to achieve significant social change, which we need to get the acceptance of CAM, then we need to involve that swarm experience you were talking about. I agree, I tend to agree with Merlin that we need the evidence as we go along. But if I can just tell you two things which I think are very relevant. One is when I first joined the board of a group called Arthritis Care in the UK, the official policy on complementary therapies was we don't recommend them, full stop. And this was because the board of the charity was predominantly doctors, with a few patients on board. And in the period of time I was on the board, about 4 or 5 years, we managed to get that changed to reflect that, 50 or 60,000 subscribers to their magazine were using complementary therapies almost every day. So we changed the policy to complementary therapies seem to work for some people. We would recommend that if you want to try these things, you find an appropriately trained person from a proper professional body, and you don't spend too much money. And as far as I'm concerned, that still stands. That is very good advice for people who are thinking of trying something for the first time. Get a professional practitioner and don't spend a lot of money on things, because somebody may be ripping you off. Now, the second experience was, I was then working as a patient representative, as a volunteer for a group across Europe of medical practitioners, rheumatologists and scientists. And they made a decision that they wanted to raise the profile of musculoskeletal conditions in Europe. Everybody was only thinking about what kills you, heart attacks, stroke, cancers, and so on. But actually, people with chronic conditions were living very poor quality of life for a very long time. And actually, not only were they suffering, but society was suffering because they're a huge drain on society. So the doctors wanted to lobby the MEPs. They set up a lot of funds. They began to campaign here in Europe. They were planning to go and visit MEPs and raise awareness. And we patients managed to persuade them that, okay, maybe 3 or 4 rheumatologists should go into the room with an MEP, but they should take a patient with them. And the doctors were, in a sense, horrified because they found that the MEPs wanted to listen to the patients rather than the doctors. The doctors were just another vested interest group. The patients represented millions of voters. And because of the very broad prevalence of something like musculoskeletal conditions, virtually every MEP had one already. Or his mother had one, or his sister had one, or his child had one. So there was a great level of interest. And so the doctors began to back off. And they gave us the physical evidence, but they actually used the patients in lobbying far more. And that's what, come back to my point from earlier on, that's what I think we need to do in this area as well.
This level, that's the first, but still we have to show that it's true that CAM practitioners use less antibiotics than conventional practitioners, and we have many questions still are not clarified. In Germany, we have A, B, and B2 recommendations, and then everybody knows actually how strong this recommendation is. And we have to differentiate, of course, what Merlin also said, the different CAM treatments, because it's a different in price, it's a different in cost, in efficacy. So
because if you unite as countries and as researchers together with the public, I think you can make a better voice.
For my feeling, we're still missing a couple of aspects in this discussion. And one of them I would call internal evidence, and the other one is, let's just call it brain development. I mean, if the people in the audience ask themselves, when did they start to create their cultural relationship to medicine? To this kind or to that kind of medicine? And for most of us who have somehow an open door for integrative medicine, this happened either where there was a kind of labile situation, a disease, where you're taking all these medicines and it's not working, and then you start, as I heard today, to do meditation, and things start changing, and then you start feeling into yourself what really does you good, and that's where internal evidence begins, and that's where standardization comes to a kind of stop, or at least meets internal evidence. And for the others, it was actually at the time, it was either through the parents, or it was at this very special time towards the end of puberty, or you could say adolescence, where our brain is reorganizing ourselves and looking for our own way, and where we're actually looking for ideals, and how can we rekindle or warm again this culture that has been taking us, that has been actually taken us all the way to where we are now. Most of what we do today is not evidence-based. It's culture. And it is the result of generations and generations of observation and refined internal medicine. And no chef-koch today would base his cooking on a randomized controlled trial.
Would you tell us about the challenges this project was facing before getting any funding? Because we hopefully can learn from the experience of the Cabrera team.
We had in the very end roadmap. What about CAM research agenda until 2020? And the most impressive point was, and the focus, to enable the population to make informed decisions about their wish to use complementary medicine in addition or substantial or as an alternative to conventional medicine. When we break down these general wish into some headings, first of all was patients' enablement and patients' involvement. And this is a topic which is the same over the years. And coming from Switzerland, I can say, yes, it's the patients, or even more the population, the still healthy patients who should be involved. In Switzerland, there was a great movement, and again, politics, which decided in a popular vote, 2009, yes, with complementary medicine, 2/3 of the votees. That's exactly the number of 20% of active users of CAM in Switzerland voted, yes, we want. And with this vote, politicians couldn't act others than include step by step parts of CAM into the medical system of Switzerland. And I'm very glad to announce even here that with the 1st of August last year, 5 methods practiced by doctors of complementary medicine are included as other medicine in the compulsory health system. It was in Switzerland, and now the circle is closing. We had in between 1999 and 2005 a government-funded project evaluation of complementary medicine, 6 million Swiss francs, 1 per discipline, 1 for the head and 1 for the administration, was given by the government, and there were some results which were so convincing for the others and so annoying for the others that the health minister stopped this process 3 weeks before ending and confiscated computers with the data and said no longer even doctors came into the compulsory health system. And this was the invent of EUROCAM, or later renamed to Cambrella. The reaction was even the research community found together to make a project. Yes, we want to show this. And on the other hand, the Swiss population said, no, we don't agree with our government. And then the popular vote was initiated, not by this way, but it needed 4 or 5 years. But then at the very end was successful. Effectiveness research, the cost-effective research, the comparison between one way or the other way to treat people may be successful. In this way, I think only the insurance companies can help us. Normally, if we can get them into the boat, whether they are really open to this, I have some doubts. But I don't hesitate to convince these because they have the data.
2 words regarding the insurance companies. There was an interesting experience in Germany where a group of anthroposophic doctors took over a hospital near Berlin that was going bankrupt. And against a lot of resistance at the beginning, also from within the hospital. And within the next 10 years, it became one of the top 10 rated hospitals in Germany, which no other general hospital has this rating. The other on the top 10 are highly specialized orthopedic or ophthalmologic hospitals, etc. But what I was wanting to point out is that this hospital was also DRG reference hospital and was able to show the insurance companies, or the insurance companies actually did the statistics and figured out the patients who had been treated with anthroposophic medicine in this hospital saved the insurance company 3,750 euros for the next 3 years. And this led to the insurance companies creating an extra budget for the hospitals who do anthroposophic medicine, which includes also integrative medicine. They receive 1,100 euros if they give the patients 30 units of anthroposophic medicine. So if we manage to convince the insurance companies on a financial level that they're in the long term saving money, there we may be open to more cooperation.
Just one word. I know this story. It's a wonderful story, but why it is not published?
What?
Why it is not officially published? Because it is fundamental from
Yes,
the public health point of view.
Yes, it was published scientifically, but it was not published enough for the public. Absolutely right. In a sense, that needs to be done.
I think your European approach is absolutely fundamental because antibiotic resistance is a problem that knows no borders. If they're approved in Germany, they should be approved in the UK. No one can tell me that Germany has lower scientific standards than the UK. That's nonsense. So we need to take an integrated approach. And maybe some other European countries, maybe there are some things from the UK, some experiences that we can share that might also be helpful, like the strategies for delayed prescribing and reducing antibiotic resistance. And I think it is really important to look at different contexts as well, because we're not all the same. There are different cultures, and we need to adapt what we do to different places. And not just at country level, but at the patient level, because we have patients in the UK that come from all over the world, and we need to be able to adapt our strategies to different people on individual and country levels. So a pan-European approach is absolutely crucial. And in the global picture, there are other competitors. China is investing a lot of money in research on its traditional herbal medicines. In fact, I've been multitasking and finishing a proposal for a collaboration with China on a project on antimicrobial resistance, for which the deadline is in 30 minutes. It's been submitted. But so there's a lot of investment from China on developing and providing high quality evidence on Chinese herbal medicine. So if Europe wants to compete in this global market, we have to invest as well in our herbal medicines. Otherwise, soon we'll be needing to import herbal medicines from China because they will have higher quality evidence than the European ones.
If we look back at this project, I think we've learned so much from each other. And we've learned so much of the networks we've been in, and we've learned so much about how we could develop a strategy which is not only for us or for the individual university important, but really a CAM strategy which can help to build the evidence level further and accessibility further. So I think we really need each other, because it's a small community, and we really need each other to go forward with our work for the next decades, I think. And I think if we really want to have impact and better impact, we have to work together and be on the European level at least.
We have a common goal, and unity in diversity. That's a characteristic of CAM, which should be addressed here too. And visibility. There are some publications not yet seen, and on the highest level we might come over these blind spots on the recognition.